I hope you guys had a great Christmas. I'm excited to see all of our students in the room. I've seen a lot of college faces back on Christmas break. I am very excited you're here today, and I hope that you are looking forward to a new year. Greg, thanks so much for your warm introduction. I appreciate you. Love you, man. Love getting to sit at your feet and learn and grow, and I am honored and excited and a teensy bit nervous to be sharing with you today. So I hope you guys will work with me, respond with me, and grow with me as we get into the Word together. Greg let me pick just about any verse, any story that I wanted to teach, but he didn't ask me to run it by him first, as any good leader would. And I've been working through this story of this knucklehead in the New Testament called Peter, who is just a riot. In preparation for our summer camps, we're doing a character study on the disciple Peter, and there is no shortage of information and content to do a whole week of camp. So shameless plug, I hope your kids are planning on coming to our overnight camp. It's going to be awesome. We're going to be getting in the Word deep, and we're going to do a deep dive today in the very last part of Peter's life. So in John chapter 21, we get to see this conclusion to his gospel, this finalization. And John chapter 21 is very much an epilogue in his letter. It's the ending. He's already ended what he said to be the conclusion of his book, which if you see in chapter 20, verse 31, it says, "But these are written so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, the Son of God, and that by believing you may have life in his name." That's the whole purpose of why John wrote the gospel. He starts it in chapter 1 by saying the Word was with God and the Word was God, identifying Jesus in the very beginning and identifying Jesus so that you may have life in his name. And I love that. So let's get into chapter 21, verse 1. After this, okay, pause there. So what's already happened in the story of John at this point is just epic. Jesus has come, he has sacrificed his life, he has risen from the dead, and on 2 occasions already, he has revealed himself to his followers. The first is to Mary Magdalene on the road outside the tomb, and the second of which was to the disciples, where he just appeared in their home. Doors locked, they're hiding, and he just shows up and reveals himself to them. And we're about to see the third revelation of Jesus in the flesh to his disciples. Chapter 21. "And after this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias." This was commonly known as the Sea of Galilee. "And he revealed himself in this way." And I love it. He appears to them in the flesh, just the way they can understand it, the way they can see it, the way they can touch it and get who he is. "Simon Peter," verse 2, Simon Peter, who's this knucklehead that we're learning all about. "Thomas," who you might more affectionately know as Doubting Thomas, who at this point in time has had a chance to see and touch Jesus in the flesh and is now a pretty converted believer. He's pretty solid in his faith. "Nathanael of Cana in Galilee." Now that's interesting. Why does John tell us that Nathanael's from Cana in Galilee? That was the first place that Jesus did a miracle, at the wedding of Cana, where he turned the water into wine. So John is showing us, hey, these people, they were eyewitnesses. They got it. They were there. They had the credibility to say, hey, what's happening is true, is good. "The sons of Zebedee." Now, John is actually one of the sons of Zebedee, so he's kind of referring to himself here as one of the witnesses, but not calling attention to himself. "And the 2 of the other disciples were there." Sorry, guys, we don't get to know who you are. So Simon Peter is there with them. And the reason why they're on this lake is because Jesus said, hey, go to Galilee and wait for me there. So they're being good followers of him, and they're going to Galilee and they're waiting. But Peter's restless. He doesn't want to just sit around and wait and do nothing. So he says to what any man would say in his trade, I'm going to get to work. I'm going to keep myself busy. So he says, I'm going fishing. And they said to him, we're going to go with you. So they went out and they got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Now this would have been devastating for them, but it's probably not the first time it's happened before. They're likely using all of Peter's equipment. They're back in his hometown, so it's not far-fetched to think that they just picked up right where he left off. They got all of his old gear, all of his old equipment while they were waiting for Jesus, and they just set out and they got to work. And this is where it gets really good. Just as day was breaking, and this daybreak imagery is classic for a new beginning, a new start, at the dawn of a new day, a new era. Jesus stood on the shore, yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus, didn't recognize him yet. And Jesus said to them, children, lads, gents, hey guys, have you caught any fish? And they answered him, no, or no, or come on, man. Can't you see we're doing our best here? We didn't get anything yet. Don't rub it in. And he said to them, we'll cast the net on the other side of the boat and you'll find some. Really? Really? We're the pros here. We know what we're doing. Really? Now, this isn't the first time Jesus has said this. The first time Jesus said this was when he called Peter in the first place. Have you guys caught anything? No, we worked all night. We didn't catch a thing. Well, go back out and cast the net on the other side. And what happened? They caught so many fish that the nets began to tear. So Jesus is giving them a little callback. And you remember I was there for you then? Well, throw the net on the other side of the fit, on the other side, and you will find some. And so they cast it, and now they were not able to haul it in because of the quantity of fish. Now, the nets didn't tear this time. I love that. But it was so much. The harvest was so plentiful. The catch was so much that they couldn't lift it. Between all 7 of them, they couldn't lift it. And the disciple whom Jesus loved, now that was John, who's writing this story, therefore said to Peter, it's the Lord. Hey, that's Jesus. I remember when this happened the last time. I recognize him now. And Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, and he put on his outer garment because he was undressed for work. He was probably in the water and he was getting wet and he didn't want to run to Jesus in his undergarments. And he threw himself into the sea. He didn't jump into the sea. He didn't wade in the water and get in so he could do that, fight against the current and run up to shore. He threw himself in with reckless abandon and swam to Jesus. And the other disciples came in the boat and dragged the net full of fish. Sorry, guys, Peter left you hanging to do the work. For they were not far from the land, but about 100 yards off. I love that as soon as Peter recognized that it was Jesus, he just dives in. And friends, I don't know who needs to hear that there's something going on, but if you recognize Jesus' voice and you are far from him, there's no shame in just throwing yourself in and going after Jesus, because he's there, he's ready for you. And as soon as Peter saw that Jesus was there and recognized him, he jumps in with reckless abandon. Verse 9. And when they got on land, they saw a charcoal fire in place. Now, it's interesting that John would specifically tell us that it was a charcoal fire, because the last place we see a charcoal fire in the narrative of John is this little inconspicuous time when Peter was in a courtyard and Jesus had just been arrested, and these people 3 times came up to him and said, hey, aren't you that guy that was with Jesus? And 3 times Peter said, no, that's not me. And he denied Jesus just like Jesus said he would. So I imagine that Peter's walking up to the shore and he sees Jesus and then he sees the fire and he says, wait a minute, I remember what you said now. I remember where I was. I remember what happened. I was there. Jesus is giving him this subtle reminder. And the fire had fish laid out on it and bread. See, he had already prepared for them to meet their needs. They had been fishing all night and had probably not eaten all night. And so they were likely hungry. And when they get to shore, Jesus already has everything prepared for them. He didn't need their catch, but he gave them this abundance just to show that he could, to show them, to remind them that he was Jesus, that he had this amazing authority over everything, and that they should recognize him and come and follow him. And when they got out on land, they saw the charcoal fire in place with fish laid out on it and bread. And Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught by my grace." So Simon Peter went aboard and hauled the net ashore full of large fish, 153 of them. Now, some scholars debate whether there's significance in 153, but I think it's as simple as these guys were professionals. They took pride in their work, and they knew exactly what their catch was, just as if you went hunting and I asked you, "Hey, what'd you get?" And you scratched your head and said, "Oh, I don't remember. It was..." No, you would know. You would tell me it was a 12-point buck or it was just a 6-point buck. But you would know with utter and complete confidence. And just the same, these are men working. They take pride in their work. And though there were so many, the net was not torn. And Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast with me." And again, he's already got everything prepared. And you may remember about a month ago, Greg taught a sermon on Psalm 23, where he gave this really, really cool background on Psalm 23. You prepare a table before me. And how that was so significant of inviting somebody into your home and preparing a feast for them meant you were going to protect them. You were not just providing for their physical needs. You were going to protect them from the forces outside of them that were trying to harm them, that they could have a protect, refuge, safe haven in your home, under your care, and that nobody would come in, because it would be unthinkable for somebody to come in to your home and harm your guests while they're there. He has a meal prepared for them, and he is going to protect them. And although Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast," now none of the disciples dared ask them, "Who are you?" Maybe he had a different look. Maybe he looked slightly different in appearance after the resurrection. I'm not sure. But they knew that it was the Lord by the work he did. They recognized him because of the action that he performed. And they knew it was him. And Jesus came and he took the bread and gave it to them, and so with the fish. And this was now the third time that Jesus was revealed to the disciples after he was raised from the dead. And what's so significant about all these details is that it sets the table for what's about to happen next. Because Peter's about to get owned. And Jesus wants him to know, "Hey, I care for you. I love you. I have provided for you. I have called you. I have set a table for you. And I am caring for you, both now and in the future." So what I'm about to say comes from a place of love. What I'm about to do may not be easy, but it's because I love you. And when they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, "Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these?" Now there's two things that are happening here. He calls Peter, not Simon Peter, but Simon, son of John. And he only does that on 3 occasions in the New Testament. The first is at the very beginning when he called Peter and said, "Hey, come follow me." He said, "Simon, son of John, I know you. I know your childhood name, your given name. Come and follow me." The second time was when Peter confessed that Jesus was the Christ and recognized that for the first time. He said, "Simon, son of John, I recognize you. I know your name. I see you." And the third time was when Peter got in a little bit of trouble and he fell asleep in the Garden of Gethsemane while Jesus was off praying. And he came back and says, "Can't you stay awake? Simon, son of John, I see you, I know you." As if when you get in trouble and your parents call you by your full name, Like, oh, I know that she means business now. Why is it all we got to be the mom? Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? More than these disciples that you're with? Maybe. More than these boats that you've worked your whole life building a business to keep and maintain? Maybe. More than your friends? Maybe. And yes to all three. Do you love me more than these? And he said to them, he, meaning Peter, said to him, Jesus, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him, then feed my lambs. My lambs. My lambs are us. We are the sheep. Going back to Psalm 23, we are the sheeple. The people that are a part of the flock of Jesus. We are the sheep. But he calls them lambs here. They're probably referring to, these are the young, the new believers. Feed my sheep. Take care of these new people that are just beginning a faith in me. And he said to him a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he says to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He said to him, tend my sheep. Look after them, care for them, keep the enemies away. And he said to him a third time. Now, how many times did Peter deny Jesus? Yeah. And Jesus is saying for 3 times, do you love me? And by this point, Peter gets it. He's hurt. He knows he did, but he knows he abandoned Jesus in this pivotal hour when he could have owned up and said, yes, that's Jesus. I know him. I'm the disciple. I've been following him. But instead, he reacts in the flesh and fear. And he's like, no, I got to look out for number 1 right now. I'm afraid. I don't know what's going to happen next. And here, for the 3rd time, Jesus says to Peter, do you love me? And Peter's grieved because he said to him a 3rd time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Of course I love you. And Jesus said to him, then feed my sheep. Truly, truly, I say to you, when you were young, you used to dress yourself and walk wherever you wanted. But when you are old, you will stretch out your hands. And this was a euphemism for crucifixion. And another will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. This he said to show by what kind of death he was to glorify God. And after saying this, he said to him, follow me. Now, I don't know about you, but if Jesus had said to me, hey, Matthew, I want you to come follow me. And, oh, by the way, it's going to cost you your life. Hey, come on. I might hesitate. I'm kind of grateful that when God called me, he didn't say how hard it was going to be because I might have had some reservations. But I think he knew that Peter could handle it here. And so he gives him the raw, unfiltered truth of what it's going to cost Peter. And he says, follow me. It wasn't, are you good enough? It wasn't, hey, have you practiced enough? It wasn't, have you been good since you last denied me? It was simply, do you love me? Do you have a care for me? Do you sincerely, deeply love me above all else? Love me more than these. Then my answer to you is simply, Peter, to follow me. And Peter turned and saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following them, the one who also has leaned his back against him during the supper and had said, Lord, who is it that's going to betray you? He's talking about John here. And when Peter saw him, he said to Jesus, Lord, what about him? What's going to happen to him? And Jesus says to him, if it's my will that he remains until I return, what's that to you? You come follow me. I'm not talking to John. I have a plan for you, Peter. I have called you by name. I have given you the name, the Rock, because I have a purpose for you. I have a plan for you to build my church. Don't worry about the next guy. You come follow me. Now, there was a time that Peter didn't live up to his name, wasn't there? He certainly wasn't this foundation during the time he was being tried and denied Jesus 3 times. He messed up. Some of us would say royally. But Jesus redeems him here. He brings him back and restores his purpose for the church, to be a shepherd, a pastor, to lead. And he says, come follow me. Now, it's interesting that he has the name Peter, the rock, because it is so, the church has been built on the idea that the confession of his faith in Jesus is the truth that we all live on. And he put his faith into action from this point forward. And we've been seeing that through the book of Acts for the last year, about how Peter went out there, again, with reckless abandon and did exactly what Jesus had called him to do and lived up to his name. So my name's Matthew, and Matthew means gift of God, literally. And I imagine that there were a couple moments in my childhood when my parents thought, I'm not so sure this was so much of a gift. And I don't know that because my mother told me and my father scolded me. I know that because when I was 22 years old, I was in a city 200 miles away from where I grew up, interviewing for an internship at Christ Church in Jacksonville, Florida. And I went into a pizza parlor to meet a bunch of the people that I was going to be interviewing with. And as soon as I walked into the door, an older gentleman immediately recognized me and said, Matthew Marion? And I looked up and said, Mr. Stewart? He was my elementary school principal, okay? What do you have to do for your elementary school principal to recognize you 10 years later? We had intimate conversations in his office on a number of occasions. And it wasn't too long after that my 5th grade teacher at the same school came and visited and ran into Mr. Stewart and came and found me and said, I was like, Mrs. V? She says, yeah, I just had to come see it for myself. I am so happy for you. It took a while to live up to God's calling for my life. Because there's a difference in saying I love Jesus. Like I would say I love golf, just like I would say I love Jesus, but they're different. Because I play golf whenever it fits me, whenever it feels good. And sometimes it feels really good. Sometimes it's a good round or a long drive or a great putt. And other times, like, I don't even want to admit that I play this game. But if I say I love Jesus, that should mean something. That should amount to a measurable action in my life. If I tell somebody, especially the Lord, but if I say to my neighbor, hey, I love Jesus, and they don't see any evidence of that in my life, Jesus might have to prepare a charcoal fire for me and bring me to it and say, hey, Matthew, I was there when you did blank and blank, and it doesn't matter. Do you love me here and now? See, God has called you for a purpose, each and every one of us. He has called us by name and has said, hey, come follow me. And I'm grateful that he hasn't told us all exactly what it is. Some of us are still figuring it out. But if any of us have any doubt, have any question of, well, what does it mean to follow Jesus? Okay, I love him, but what do I do now? I want you to turn with me to Romans chapter 12. Paul gives us an idea of what it looks like because of our salvation in the chapters leading up to it. Paul says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. Okay, so there's the dichotomy. It's the world versus the spirit. I faced this same dilemma when I was a teenager, and I realized I was a hypocrite. I realized I knew about God, but I was living like the world. And I changed schools from this private Christian school that was a great place to grow up and learn the Bible. and I begged my parents to let me leave. And they eventually did. So I started my junior year at the huge public high school, just like the Dripping Springs High School. And when I got there, I realized, well, there's a bunch of Christian kids here. But they actually have a life that looks like somebody that's following Jesus. And there's a bunch of worldly kids here. But they actually do what they say. And they believe what they say. That God is not real. And they live it. And here I was in the middle, with a foot in both camps. And I realized I was a hypocrite. And so I wrestled with it. And it was for the first time, really, that I opened up the Word and dug into it on my own and with the help of some mentors, and realized that I was starving myself, that I was famished. And I didn't even realize it. Jesus had prepared a feast for me, and I was off in my boat, in my corner, doing my thing and loving it and being miserable. But I was starving. And when I opened up the Gospels and got into them, I realized that there was a feast available to me. And the way I thought began to change. Do not be conformed to the world, but be transformed. Some of you might think, okay, I can do that, but it's not you that's doing it. It's the Spirit that does it through you. It's not you go out and set a New Year's resolution. It's you go here and let the work of God, the Spirit of God, do its work in you and through you. And then the fruit that comes from that will be evident to those around you. And if you have a doubt about whether your fruit is good or bad, ask the people around you. Ask the people that you love. If you're so bold, ask your children. I guarantee you that your children's kindergarten teacher knows more about you than you might even know. They will tell you the raw truth about what you love. Just turn to your kids and say, hey, what do I love? What do I care about? And really listen to what they say. They'll tell you how you spend your time, where you put your thought, how you spend your money, and where your effort is. Now, for those of you, if you might find yourself in the situation of, I'm just not there yet. I'm not in a place to get in the Word, or I just don't believe this yet. I'm still in the boat. I'm in my 9 to 5, just like Peter. I'm doing what I do, and I do it well. I've got a catch of 153 fish, but you don't recognize that it was by God's grace that you have that catch. So you're there toiling. You're bringing all that fish into the boat, saying, oh, look what I did. But you haven't recognized Jesus on the shore yet. But I want you to hear that he's there for you. He's ready for you. He's calling out to you. He says, hey, buddy, hey, pal, I'm here for you. I'm ready for you. I've already done the work, don't you see? I've already paid the price. You don't have to keep working for my goodness, for my grace. I did that. All I want you to do is jump out of the boat. I know it's scary. I know you don't know what to expect. You don't know what's under the water, and you don't know what to expect when you get to the shore. But just jump. I got you. And if that's you today, I want you to know that God is good, and his grace is sufficient for you. He has a plan for you. He's probably not going to tell you exactly what it is all at once because you couldn't handle it. Just like our children, we give them a little bit at a time. First, we give them milk, and then we give them blended food, and then we give them, I don't know what that stuff is, but it's what's next before they get to solid meat, the good stuff, barbecue. So if that's you today, if you're still in the boat, just go to God. Whenever you're ready, he's there for you. He's calling out to you. We're going to have some people up front to receive you if you want to pray, if you want to pursue that relationship with the Lord first time. But if you're saying, hey, I'm in the will of God, keep charging forward. Keep following me. It doesn't end until it ends. Until we're in eternity with him forever. And my prayer for you today is that you would continue to die to yourself so that you can live up to the name that Jesus has already called you. Pray with me. Jesus, we love you. We surrender to you. Please lead us tenderly. Lead us graciously. Hold us by your hand at times when we are falling down and we're getting tripped up and when we doubt, when we stumble. And help us continue to do the work that you've called us to do, to love you and to love your people well. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.